Hello, good afternoon, students. I'm Ms. Rukmanisha, your biology teacher, and we'll be studying today the new unit, Unit 1, Diversity in the Living World, where under which we'll learn 4 chapters. Chapter 1, Living World, Chapter 2, Biological Classification, Chapter 3, Plant Kingdom, and Chapter 4, Animal Kingdom. Okay, so we will begin with Chapter 1, the Living World, under which we'll be learning we'll understand what living condition is known as, and what biodiversity means, and why the classification is required, and 3 domains of life, concept of species and taxonomical hierarchy, and binomial nomenclature. Okay, so these all are the topics which we are going to learn under chapter 1. Now, diversity in the living world, what does it mean? It means that all the living organisms which exist around us, they are diversely available in this world. Diversely, in varieties of form, they are available and existing in different habitat. Okay, and to understand all the living organism, to understand all the characteristic of this living organism, we need to categorize them, classify them, then only we can study them. So that's why we are learning today this diversity in the living world, and if we learn about all this organism, we can relate with this organism, and we can understand the nature and understand the living world better. Okay, so we will start with chapter 1, the living world, where the biography of Ernst Mayr is given. You can see in the second page of your textbook, or the very first page of chapter 1. Okay, and the second page of the content. Ernst Mayr was born in 1904 and died in 2004, and he was from Germany, and he studied in Harvard University, and where he gained the title of Alexander Associate Professor of Zoology Emeritus. So why? Because he studied in several areas such as ornithology, taxonomy, zoography, evolution, systematics, and history and philosophy of biology. Okay, his main contribution was to his main contribution was in the field of the origin of species diversity, that is in the evolutionary biology. That is where his main contribution was. Okay, and the definition of biological species was also given by Ernst Mayr, and Ernst Mayr was awarded 3 prizes. So that's why he was named as Triple Crown of Biology: a Belson Prize, International Prize in Biology for Biology, and Crafoord Prize. All these 3 prizes was given for biology to him, and he died after completing 100 years in 2004. Okay, and he was also known as the Darwin of 20th century, because he was studying again the same topic which Darwin explained during his time. Okay, Darwin explained about the origin of species. So he explained the same thing: origin of species diversity. He explained in terms of diversity, whereas Darwin explained in terms of origin of species only, how species originated. Now, with the help of his contribution, we will understand better the living world. Now, when you study living world, what are we going to study? What is living? On what basis the living organisms are considered as living? Okay, and then diversity in living world, and taxonomic categories, and binomial nomenclature. As I have told you, what are the topics which I have not told you. The topics which we are going to learn in this chapter is the condition, on what basis we consider the living organism as living, and then biodiversity, need for classification, 3 domains of life, and concept of species and taxonomical hierarchy, binomial nomenclature. These are the topics which we are going to see in this video. Okay, in today's video. Now we will begin with the living world's habitat. We see, when we say diversity, all the organisms, they exist in, they do exist, right? But do they exist in only one place? Do they exist in only one habitat? No, living organism exist in various habitat, and that is what is very surprising. In very hot spring, in very hot places, hot habitats such as hot spring area, and in very cold places such as Arctic and Antarctic region also, you will find living organism and surviving and reproducing and continuing their species. So it is very amazing to see all this living organism residing in different habitats. Okay, and this organisms which lives in different habitat, they develop different nature and different characteristic, and that is how the diversity of living organism comes. The diversity is because of they live in different habitat, and that is how they develop different nature and different characteristic on the basis of their habitat and their living nature, and they come under and that is how they become different from different organism. Okay, so we are going to see different organism with different nature and different characteristic in this chapter. So that is what we call diversity is. Okay, so first since we are starting with the living, so first we need to understand what are the characteristic under considering which we what are the characteristic considering which we term that living organism, we term that organism as living, we consider that living organism as living. So we will see that. So what we are learning today is the chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1, the criteria, the living world, and the first topic which we have seen that organisms, they are found in different habitats. With different nature. Okay, organisms, they are found in different habitats with different nature. So we were saying that the living organisms are of different kinds because of their habitats and different types of habitats and different types of nature. Now on what condition we consider living organism to be living? What is living? What are the criteria on which the living conditions are defined? Okay, how living or how life is defined on what conditions. So we will see one by one. What is living? Number 1, growth. To grow is considered to be as living. Okay, to grow is considered to be as living. Now many organisms are there which grow by cell. Many organisms are there which plants and animals, once they become adult, they don't grow, right? But when they are born, when they are young, so they grow in size, and then they become adult, they mature. Okay, so how do they grow in size and then they mature? So this growth in most of the organisms, in all the growth in most of the organisms, it takes place by cell division. Okay, due to cell division, the growth of the organism takes place. The growth of mass, and due to the growth of mass, the size grows, and that is how they become mature and adult. Okay, but there are unicellular organisms they are composed of only one cell. So they don't grow by cell division. Okay, they can replicate by cell division, but they don't grow by cell division. Okay, so here this growth which we are seeing here due to cell division is basically for the multicellular organism. Okay, so multicellular organism, they grow by cell division, and the cell multiplies, and that is how the number of cell increases and the mass increases. Okay, so this cell division leads to the increase in cell number and mass. Okay, cell number and mass. Now some of the organisms, we have to compare this living organism with non-living. So there are some conditions where you see the non-living things are also growing. For example, you see a small piece of cloud floating in the sky. So after some time you will see that the sky has become very big. So the cloud has grown. Okay, the growth of the cloud you have seen. So in that case, will we consider cloud to be living? No, we will not consider cloud to be living. So that is why here growth as a criteria, as a very definite criteria, we cannot put under the definite criteria of living. Okay, because growth sometimes we see in non-living things also. Of course, that growth is not due to cell division or their cell number increase or their mass increases, but due to some event. Okay, so for some example, there is a soil, a mass of soil, and due to some storm or due to accumulation of some more soil, the growth of that soil mass will increase, but that is not internal growth. Okay, whereas in living you will see that it is an internal growth. Here the cell divides internally, and it increases the mass and the cell number of the organism, and that is how the growth takes place. So growth is the condition of a living organism, but it cannot be considered as a very important definite condition or a definite property of living organism. Okay, so next is reproduction. Ability to produce its own kind. Ability to produce its own kind is known as reproduction. Now, reproduction is to replicate some organism. Now, in case of growth, we were saying that unicellular, they don't grow in size. They are only made up of one cell, so they don't grow into like 10 cell or 20 cell because they are unicellular. So, growth is not applicable for unicellular, but growth is applicable for multicellular in terms of living. But reproduction, here it is applicable for unicellular and multicellular both. Okay, so multicellular, they reproduce mainly by sexual reproduction, or some multicellular, they also reproduce by asexual mode. Okay, the mode of reproduction can be sexual and asexual in case of multicellular organism. In plants, you must have seen some plants, they reproduce asexually by the help of the root itself, vegetative propagation, which we say. You cut the part of the plant, and from that part of the plant a new plant comes up. So that is a asexual mode of reproduction. Okay, but when the fertilization of male gamete and female gamete takes place, that leads to sexual reproduction. So the reproduction in multicellular can happen by sexual reproduction, by sexual mode, or by asexual mode. Okay, and in unicellular organism, they also reproduce, but by asexual mode. Okay, such as amoeba, they divide their cell into two, and then the two daughter cells are formed from the mother cell. Now, in case of unicellular, the mother do not exist after reproducing the two daughter cells, because the mother itself divides into two and give rise to two daughter cells. So the mother does not exist. Now remaining is only the two daughter cell. Okay, so unicellular organism, they do cell division and then they reproduce, whereas multicellular organism, they do sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction and then they reproduce. They reproduce their own kind, their own progeny. Now that we don't see in non-living organism. Non-living things or non-living matter, they don't reproduce. Okay, they don't, like if you have one bottle on the table, so you keep it for 10 years, 20 years, it will remain as one bottle only. It will not reproduce into two bottles. Okay, if there is one mountain in your village or in your place, that mountain will not replicate into 4 mountains after 2 years or after 10 years. Okay, so this non-living matter, non-living things, they don't reproduce. So it is a very good criteria for the living condition. But there is one more condition here. There are some people who cannot reproduce. There are human couples who cannot produce their own kinds. And there are some organisms which cannot produce their progeny, such as sterile worker bees. Okay, and in human being you see some couples, they cannot produce their children, so they are sterile. They are sterile. Even if they want, they cannot reproduce. So in that case, if you consider solely that reproduction is a definite criteria of living, then it cannot be said, and we cannot categorize that sterile couple as non-living. So those organisms such as sterile worker bees, okay, those bees. So if those bees, they cannot reproduce, can we consider them as non-living? A human who cannot reproduce, can we consider them as non-living? No, we cannot, right? So this is not a definite criteria. Growth is not a definite criteria. Okay. So what do we understand? So from reproduction, that multicellular organism and unicellular organism by different modes, okay, by cell division, in unicellular by cell division and multicellular by sexual and asexual mode, they reproduce. So this is the living criteria we know. Okay, but there is one condition. What is that condition? That there are some sterile organisms. Sterile means the condition under which organism cannot reproduce. That condition is called sterile. Okay, so here the worker bee, they cannot reproduce. Sterile couples, they cannot reproduce. Okay, this category of organisms, can you label them as non-living because they cannot reproduce? No. Okay, so there are some conditions, sterile conditions, where reproduction is not taking place, but still they are considered as living. So that is why this is not a definite criteria. Reproduction is not a definite criteria. Growth is not a definite criteria. Why growth is not a definite criteria? Because we have seen that unicellular organism, they don't do cell division, and then they don't grow in size after doing cell division. So can we consider that amoeba is non-living, bacteria is non-living? No, you cannot consider, right? So though they don't have growth, unicellular organism, you cannot consider them as non-living. Okay, so this growth, to grow and reproduce, you cannot consider to be as a definite criteria for living. Okay, so we'll see another criteria. We need to run this. Number third criteria is metabolism or metabolic activity. So to understand first what metabolism is, first we need to understand what metabolism means. Metabolism means biochemical changes which takes place inside our body. Now what is this biochemical changes? Biochemical changes means, see, we all living organisms are made up of biomolecules. Biomolecule is the chapter right after the cell chapter which we have completed. So we'll come to that chapter later. So this biomolecules, that means our body is made up of what? Carbohydrate, protein and fats. So this carbohydrate, protein and fats which is present in our body, they go through several changes in our body. Okay, and where these changes takes place? In our cell. Okay, our cell, it breaks down glucose and then it makes what? ATP. Okay, energy. Okay, so the proteins, the amino acids are combined and they are formed protein, and this protein will make hormone, or they will act as an enzyme, or they will make our muscle tissue. Okay, so this all making process of like protein and the breaking of glucose which we are saying, this all takes place inside the cell. Okay, so our cell is going through an activity of making and breaking. Okay, and this making and breaking process is a very important process for any living organism to survive. Now, if you we cannot imagine our life without energy. Okay, so from where this, for every activity we require energy, even the least activity which you do, like sleeping or lying down or sitting, for that also you will need energy. Okay, so energy is from how do you get this energy? So energy in the form of ATP we get because the glucose breaks down. And where this glucose breaks down? Inside the cell. Okay, via several chemical reaction. Alright, so this glucose breaking down is not a simple process. Some breaking down process takes place. Okay, and then that is when the energy is formed. Okay, that is when the energy is formed. In the same manner, the protein synthesis, as we were saying, making of protein. How do we make? So inside the cell, we collect the amino acids. The cells are collecting the amino acids and they are making this protein. And why these proteins are required? To making the muscle, to make enzyme, to make hormones, okay, in our body. So all this activity which is taking place inside the cell, okay, and that activity is related with a biochemical reaction. So what I have told you right now, the breaking down of glucose and the process of making protein, that is a biochemical reaction. Okay, this process is taking place by biochemical reaction. Why we are adding bio? Because these molecules are present in living organism. The glucose, protein, they are present in living organism. Okay, and due to which our necessary activities, necessary vital function of our body is taking place. Kidney is excreting, stomach is digesting, and heart is pumping blood. All these processes are taking place because of this metabolism. Okay, so you understood what metabolism means, right? Metabolism is a biochemical reaction which takes place inside the cell. Now, biochemical reaction which takes place inside the cell, and it is of two types, that is catabolism or catabolic reaction, or we say catabolism, and anabolic reaction or anabolism. So what are the examples I gave in metabolism? Can you recall? Breaking down of glucose. So breaking down comes under catabolic reaction. And the other example which I gave you is protein synthesis, making of protein. So making of protein is an anabolic reaction. Okay, so inside the cell, when reaction is happening and something is breaking down into some other products, okay, and that process, that reaction is catabolic reaction, and that is one of the metabolism. And inside the cell, if something is been synthesized, something has been made, that is anabolic reaction. Okay, so this metabolism, it happens inside the cell, whether it is in unicellular organism or whether it is in multicellular organism, it happens in all the cells. Okay, it can happen in all the cells, whether it is the cell of a unicellular organism or whether it is a cell of multicellular organism. It happens in all the cells. Okay, so metabolism, without this reaction we cannot get the necessary products on which we are dependent to live. We are dependent on energy to live. Okay, we are dependent on protein to live. All right, so if these reactions are not taking place, we cannot live at all. Whether it is multicellular organism or unicellular organism, no organism can live without metabolism. And in any form, non-living thing do not do any kind of metabolic reaction or metabolism. Okay, so this is a very definite, it is a very definite criteria, or it is a very definite property of living organism. Metabolism is very definite property of living. Metabolism is a very definite property of living. All right. Next, one more criteria is there. You can use this. Consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness is ability to sense and respond to the environment. Okay, you can sense and you can respond to the environment, and if you don't respond to the environment, you cannot survive. A very simple example: if you can see a deer, okay, deer sitting in the grass, sitting on the grassland, and the deer has been followed by a cheetah or a leopard, and if the deer does not respond to the predator which is coming towards it, then what will happen to the deer? The deer will die. Okay, so ultimately some deers, they die because they are weaker comparing to the predator. Okay, sometimes they run off, but sometimes they cannot escape, and then they are being killed by the predator. Okay, but you will never see a deer sitting when the predators are running towards them. Okay, so when the predators are running towards them, your instinct, okay, the deer's instinct says that it is a danger. Okay, so this consciousness, okay, ability to sense, okay, ability to respond, okay, ability to sense and respond. When you sense something, you need to respond, you need to run, okay, for your life. So in plants also, of course in plants they cannot move, but they can sense and also they can respond. When chemicals are available around the soil, the plants respond to that chemical and then they show a good growth. Okay, and the shoot responds towards the light. Okay, and the roots responds towards the gravity, and that is why they grow towards the soil. And shoots, they respond towards the light and they grow towards the light outside the soil. Alright, so these are the sense and responding of the living organism, which every organism do. Even the unicellular organism they do. For example, amoeba. If amoeba is a unicellular organism, we know. So right now consciousness, we were talking about the ability to sense and respond. So we were giving an example, we were seeing an example of multicellular, right? Okay, we were giving an example of multicellular. Now we have to see that a definite property of living organism should be applicable to all the group of living organism. For example, metabolism. was applicable for all the organisms, right? But growth was applicable only for multicellular, but growth was not applicable for the unicellular. Okay? So, and reproduction was not applicable to all the organisms. They have reproduction as skipped the sterile organisms. So, sterile couples, sterile animals, they cannot reproduce, but they are still living, right? So, they are not including all the organisms. So, here the first thing, the metabolism includes all the living organisms, and consciousness, they also include all the living organisms. So, amoeba, being a unicellular organism also, they also can sense and respond. So, we know that amoeba is irregular in shape. They have nucleus here, right? But somewhere here, if it observes the presence of prey, okay, if it observes the presence of prey, here is the food. Okay, and here is amoeba. So, amoeba can sense the presence of food. So, what does it do? It starts moving. How? By forming a pseudopodia. By forming these two legs, a false leg we call pseudopodia, and they will move towards the food and they will engulf it. So, what is this? This entire activity? Here the amoeba is sensing and responding to the food available here, and that is why amoeba is a living organism, because it has a consciousness. So like that, every organism has this consciousness, okay, consciousness of sense and responding. Now especially human being, they have other level of consciousness. What is that other level? Self-consciousness, okay, which other organism they don't have. We have a capacity of understanding ourselves. We have a capacity of developing awareness about ourselves. Okay, so that is known as self-consciousness, which other animals they lack. Okay, whereas the common consciousness is present in all the organisms. So that's why consciousness is what kind of criteria? It's a definite criteria of living organism. Now we'll move to the next topic. So we are clear here that what are the conditions we require to be considered as living. So there is a condition of growth, reproduction, metabolism and consciousness, and out of these four, metabolism and consciousness, they are the definite criteria of living. Okay, the first two criteria is not definite, but of course they are the criteria for the living organism. Now coming to the diversity, biodiversity. Biodiversity is variety of living organism in case of multicellular, in case of unicellular. When we see variety of living organism living in variety of habitats and with different nature, so that is known as biodiversity. Okay, and it also means the number of different types of organism on earth. Okay. Variety, under which, like the previous chapter, cell chapter, under the cell chapter you have learned that there are two variety of cell, prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell, and then prokaryotic cell has again different types of bacteria, mycoplasma and pleuropneumonia like organism, and the E. coli bacteria. All these are different types of bacteria again. Okay, variety of bacteria under prokaryote. Then eukaryote, under eukaryote is plant cell, animal cell, fungal cell, algae, okay, or protista. All these are eukaryotic cells. So varieties. There's a variety of different types of organisms. Each organisms in this variety, they represent species. They represent their species, and there are around estimated 1.7 to 1.8 million species. Okay, each organism. So now, as I was giving the simplest example, the bacteria. So PPLO is also a bacteria, that is pleuropneumonia-like bacteria. E. coli is also a bacteria, and then mycoplasma is also a bacteria, right? But they are all different types. So mycoplasma is one organism, PPLO is one organism, and E. coli is one organism. So E. coli represents one species, PPLO represents one species, and mycoplasma represents one species. So each different organism, they represent different species. They represent species. Okay. Now, all these species of organism have different names in different country, in their locality, in their state or district, and different parts of the country or other part of the world. This same organism have different names. Okay, same organism may have different names, but their characters will be same, right? Now, when all these organisms have different name, it will create a confusion when people will come together and try to study them. Okay, they will not be able to identify which animal the other person is talking about and which animal the other person is talking about. Might be they all are talking about the same animal, but they have different names for those animals. So that's why there will be a confusion. Now, to avoid that confusion, there is a need of standardizing the naming of living organisms. Okay, so all these varieties of organisms needs to standardize the naming process of organism. Which we call nomenclature. Nomenclature means standardized way of naming an organism is known as nomenclature. Okay. So what is that standardized way? Scientific name. Scientific name. And the scientific name was given by Carlos Linnaeus. It was given by, this was explained by Carlos Linnaeus. Remember, to give a scientific name to any organism, to be named, first thing what we should be doing, identification. And how do we identify organism? Identification is done on the basis of observable character. And this observable characters will be same for every organism in any part of the world, right? Now we were talking about Carolus Linnaeus. He did the scientific naming of the organism. Now, to name any organism, to name any organism, first we need to identify that organism. And without identifying, we cannot simply give a name. Okay, I have observed this organism. Suppose I have observed this organism, or let me give it a name rectangle. Okay, I have, let me give it a name square. And let me give it a name a flat. Okay, so we cannot randomly name them. But we have to observe that character. Okay, their two sides are equal and the other two sides are unequal. Okay, so this is not a square, this is a rectangle. So we have to observe it, right? So, and we have to identify, okay, this is made up of a wooden piece here, and this is made up of a sponge piece here which can rub the ink from the board. Okay, so we have to name it as duster. We cannot simply name it as piece of wood, right? So how do we name any organism? We name it by observing their characters. Okay, and this observation is same all over the world. Now if I have named this as a duster, suppose duster is a scientific name, a universal name. Okay, so it will be named as duster in other part of the country and in different countries also. Okay, why? Because there also the scientist has observed that this is a wooden piece and this is a sponge. That's why it is a duster. Now it cannot be named, I mean the universal name, okay? It cannot be named differently in, suppose in South India, it cannot be differently named. So it will be differently named if the scientists observe this to be a piece of plastic and this to be a piece of cloth. Then they will give different name. But obviously, in South India also, the scientists will consider will characterize this as a piece of wood and piece of sponge, right? So this observation will be same everywhere. This cannot become plastic in other part of the country. This cannot become a piece of cloth in other part of the country. If this is a wood, it will remain wood in all the parts. So the observable character is same everywhere. Okay, it is same everywhere. So that's why the identification will be done universally. Okay, once the identification is done, the naming procedure starts. So the procedure of this nomenclature are given by two institutes, ICBN and ICZN. They give the procedure of naming any organism. IC is an international code for botanical name and ICZN is an international code for zoological name. Okay, so these two organization, they has developed a principle, the procedures, and this procedure has some principles. So in these principles, it includes that principles of scientific name, it includes the generic name first. The scientific name should have generic name and specific epithets, and this scientific name is therefore known as binomial nomenclature because they are made up of two words. Okay, and this scientific name was given by Carolus Linnaeus. Now we will take an example of mango. How mango is named. Mango is named as Mangifera indica. Okay, so what are the principles applied here? The first is this first letter of first word. The first word is in page number 7. You'll find all the 4 rules given for naming the scientific name. The first word is genus. Okay, and the second word is species. Generic name, species, epithet. Okay, and these two words should be written in. This is the first rule and second principle or rule, you can say. It should be, this word should be written in italics. If it is typed, then you can select the italic font and type. And since when you are handwriting, or if the words are handwritten, like this is handwritten, so it is not in italic. So what I have done, I have to underline. Handwritten one, you have to underline separately. And remember, the genus name should start with capital letter and species name should start with small letter. Genus word should start with capital letter and species should start with small letter. Okay, and this is how the scientific names are written. Okay, I hope it is clear till here. So the scientific name, binomial nomenclature and the scientific name we have already completed. Biodiversity and the living world criteria we have completed. So next we'll do the classification in our next class, and the other topics will complete it in the next class. Okay, so I request all the students to do the revision properly and go through the content thoroughly and observe this video thoroughly, and we'll come to this in our Google Meet, that what are the feedback from this video or the previous content or this content. Any doubt, we am individually available in WhatsApp, so do message. Okay, have a good day. Thank you.